welcome back to the BlindishLatina YouTube channel. Today is going to be a special video because I'm actually going to take you into another side of my life. Now, if you're a disabled professional or you're following me because you want to learn about disability, then this is perfect for you because you might not know that I'm a public speaker and consultant on disability awareness and inclusion in the workplace. So that's the other side of my life. If you're following for the accessible tourism content, thank you so much. Love to have you here. In honor of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which is in October, and Latina Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th, and we have that overlap, I thought it would be really fun to do a different style of video where I'm inviting you to participate in a fireside chat format with me, which is something that I offer a lot of times to companies during this time period who really want that conversational vibe. So with the fireside chat, someone engages in conversation with me and asks questions, and we get to touch on a lot of different topics. So this conversation is going to touch on disability inclusion in the workplace, intersectionality, my identity as a disabled Latina woman, and bring it all together to how can you make the workplace better and what do people need to know. And this is still a very relevant and important conversation across workplaces because there are so many places where the learning journey is just starting or employees are facing barriers that really we can make better with a little bit of education and conversation. The fireside chats are super highly requested, and I've been doing a lot of public speaking this month. So come along for a little slice into this different side of my life. So let's get started. My partner is going to be asking me the questions, and these are actually real questions that I give to my clients in a fireside chat question bank. And they pick from these questions and they can also create their own. Now, let's get started.
You're very vocal about overcoming the cliches such as being called inspirational and brave. How can we build productive conversations about diversity and disability without falling into the traps of token representation and encapsulated identities?
We have to start with talking about the inspiration narrative that is commonplace when it comes to disability. When we hear that someone is disabled or when we see it in the media, oftentimes immediately the word that is applied to that person is inspiring or brave, but it does not come with any evidence. What have they done to be inspiring or brave other than just exist and go outside as a disabled person or just wake up and live life? And that's where we run into so much danger because this really focuses on the disabled person being almost an object and dehumanized, becoming this object for other people to react to. The non-disabled person's perspective is centered here because then you're inspiring them. So disabled people exist as whole people. Even though we aren't often seen or portrayed in that way, we are whole people. We don't exist to be objects of inspiration for others, and we don't exist to be teachable lessons. So it's really important for people who, if you want to call a disabled person inspiring, I ask you to check yourself, hold on a moment. If that person was non-disabled, would you call them inspiring for the very same thing? And that's a good way to check yourself and see where that ableism is coming in. Because the inspiration narrative is rooted in ableism. Because oftentimes what happens with the disability identity is that non-disabled people think that we have bad lives. They think it's horrible to be disabled. In fact, I'm deafblind. People think that that's a horrible existence. People ask me, why do you travel if you can't see or hear? Like, why do you even do anything? Because they have such limited imaginations and believe that it's not enjoyable to have experiences if you don't have vision or hearing. Even though I have a little bit of vision and a little bit of hearing, I always fight back against this narrative to say, hey, there are 5 senses. We cannot forget about touch, taste, smell, and there are other ways to experience life and communicate, and there are ways to adapt. So just because you as a non-disabled person cannot imagine that my experience could be enjoyable doesn't mean that it's not enjoyable. Like, I'm actually living in a wonderful way. So that's really, really important to push back on. And if you want to learn more about the inspiration narrative, I highly recommend the TEDx talk by Stella Young called I'm Not Your Inspiration. thank you very much. It's a classic talk, it's super funny, and she is a legendary ancestor in the disability community. So I'm always recommending that. So in terms of what we can do to avoid these narratives and tokenizing disabled people, I think it's really important to look at how you're describing a disabled person. When you have a default to say that someone is inspiring, try to use other words. Try to describe their accomplishments. So if someone calls me inspiring for having 2 graduate degrees, I'll take that. Or being a successful entrepreneur, I'll take that because I know where that's coming from. That has a basis. But if someone's just saying, oh, she has Usher syndrome and she's inspiring, I'm going to have my antenna up for like, I don't know about that. So it's very important to make sure that you're describing disabled people as whole people. If you are writing, say that you're in the media or you're writing a TV show, if you happen to be doing that, please put us as main characters. Don't just have us as side characters to be reacted to or to teach a lesson to the main characters, and give us some faults. Make us be people that make mistakes too, because we are fully human just like anyone else.
That's really interesting. And I hope people take that into account when they talk about things being inspiring in the future. As a numbers person, I was intrigued to read that currently 1/4 of adults in the United States have a disability. In what ways do companies and organizations benefit by being thoughtful and intentional in including this population within the workplace?
I love this question because now we're really getting to inclusion and the action part of disability inclusion at work. First, we have to address the statistic here. 1 in 4 adults in the United States has a disability. This is according to a nationwide survey. However, people have to self-report here. They have to say yes when they're asked if they have a disability. Many people who are disabled still are contending with internalized ableism and not feeling confident about their disability identity. Some people don't even want to identify as disabled even though they have a disability. So there can be some shame there that people are working through, and that's part of their journey. It's totally understandable, especially with how disability is portrayed in our society. What I want everyone to take away from that is that the number is an undercount. We don't just have 25% of adults in our society who are disabled. The number is larger than that, because you have the people who are not identifying themselves, and you also have people who are not diagnosed yet. And that is a very common experience as well. When we're in the workplace, you might have a statistic on hand of what percentage of your workplace is disabled. This is also going to be an undercount because up to 80% of all disabilities are non-apparent, which means you can't look at someone and know if they are disabled. Even my disability can be non-apparent. Right now, I'm sitting before you, I'm not wearing my glasses, I'm not holding my white cane, and you might not notice that I'm wearing hearing aids in each of my ears. So you might talk to me as if I can see you, hear you, and I might not see you or hear you. And that's a situation that can come up in my life where people will then assume that I'm rude or I'm ignoring them. But I actually haven't heard or seen them. And that's really frustrating because I don't even know this is happening. And people are making those assumptions and often leaving the interaction with me. This is really common, not just for disabilities like mental health conditions, learning disabilities, neurodivergence, all of these disabilities, chronic illness. There's just so many types of disabilities that you cannot see when you look at someone. And so that's going to come up in the workplace. You have a bunch of people there who are not on record as being disabled, but they're already in your workforce. They're already a part of it. So how you benefit by focusing on accessibility, focusing on inclusion, is that you're supporting a bunch of your workers who don't currently have the right supports. If you're not receiving accommodations, if you're not open about your disability, oftentimes what you're doing is you're accommodating yourself. And that takes a lot of energy. And you might not be working to your fullest potential. But when your employer makes changes to be more inclusive, to present information in multiple ways, to provide flexibility in meetings, to give options and make the workplace accessible overall, then people can get what they need without even asking for it. They can just tap into the things that you're already doing. such as captioning, providing different ways for people to create their deliverables, so it doesn't all have to be written reports. Maybe they can create videos, or maybe they can create live presentations. Whatever it is, these initiatives will help your entire workplace, because that is then going to reach people that are undiagnosed, who are not open, who maybe are temporarily disabled, don't even, just have a preference for something that you're not providing right now. And you're going to make the workplace better for everyone and get better work out of your employees. You're also going to develop more trust and more positive feelings about being in the workplace. Because if I'm struggling in my day-to-day because I can't hear on the phone, I can't navigate well in an office holiday party, and I'm struggling to hear in meetings, then I am not going to have as positive associations with my work experience and with my employer. And I might not stay there as long. But if I'm working somewhere where I'm included and I feel like I can do my best work and I'm feeling secure and happy, then yes, I'm going to contribute and I'm hopefully going to stay. So I think workplaces are going to benefit from that. Also, profitability, innovation, these benefits also happen when everyone can contribute to their highest potential, share their thoughts, and when diverse viewpoints are supported and valued.
It seems like organizations can really make big impact with some simple steps here.
We are right next to you. We are in front of you. We are on stage giving keynote speeches. Successful workplaces make disability inclusion a priority. When we're all included, we can create a better world for everyone.
I've been seeing the phrase ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. To me, that sounds like there might be the energy around inclusion not being just offering accommodations, and there's more to it than that. What do you make of comments like these?
This is really important and foundational, so I'm so glad that we're addressing this. The ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. So first of all, the ADA, for anyone unfamiliar, is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it requires that employers make reasonable accommodations for employees who are disabled and ask for them. So for example, I've had a reasonable accommodation in the past when I couldn't hear on an office phone, and I simply shared, hey, I can't hear on the phone. The employer worked with me and brought in IT to figure out what the solution could be. And the best solution ended up being a pair of headphones that cost less than $500, along with a virtual application that allowed me to use my phone from my computer and stream the sound to these headphones. And that allowed me to hear well enough. Just because I had this accommodation met, which is my legal right as far as being an employee of the company, doesn't mean that everything was accessible for me all of a sudden. This solved a problem that I had in one context only. And so that's what we mean when we say the ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. If a company is fulfilling all reasonable accommodations requests, then fabulous. Your work is not done. Not everyone is going to ask for accommodations. As we spoke about earlier, not everyone's open about their disability. That's going to limit the amount of people that are receiving accommodations. And then also, with accommodations themselves, they don't fully make the everyday work experience accessible. And I'll give an example from my own life. When I was working at this employer, I would go into meetings, and if they were very large meetings, I wasn't able to hear everyone in the room because I would sit to face the front speaker and read lips. But if people are participating from the back corners, I wasn't able to hear all of that. So I would miss out on things in meetings. Going into the kitchen to make my lunch, I have a very limited visual field. It's a little box like this, so I can't see on the sides. When the kitchen was crowded, I would feel overwhelmed and stressed about making my lunch because I have to navigate a few different areas in order to heat it up in the microwave and then leave. So I was eating my lunch in the later afternoon. And when it was less busy, that's a way that I accommodated myself. But just to give that example, that one accommodation didn't solve my workplace experience. And that's going to happen with many other disabilities. So someone might have an accommodation to leave work early, for example, or to take their medication somewhere private, but that might not mean that everything they encounter in their whole day other than that is inclusive for them. So that's something I really want everyone to remember. So when we think about, okay, what is our goal as a company? I think the goal should be to be inclusive and accessible by design. And that is something that no one has to ask for, no one has to disclose their disability in order to receive, because it impacts everyone at the company and it goes into all the areas of work. So for example, you could have a rule that requires accessibility plans to be mandated for any employee initiative or anything that's going on, that an accessibility plan has to be attached. That would really get people up to speed to how to make things accessible. They would start learning how to do that if it was mandated. So that's just one simple way that a company can ensure that it's actually going to happen across the company. And there are many other ways to make inclusion the mindset that you have, rather than just meeting accommodations. And if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend, yes, I'm going to toot my own horn, my TEDx talk, Creating Inclusive Workplaces for All, because I break this down through storytelling and I give some really simple best practices, and I go over this whole topic because I really care about making sure that companies commit to inclusion and don't put the burden on us, the disabled employees. We have so much to offer. We're ready to contribute, and we are innovative, we are creative. We've learned a lot from adapting and living in an inaccessible world. So we're just looking for companies to do their part as well. And so that's what I'm teaching in my TEDx talk.
There's definitely levels to inclusion, huh? How would you describe intersectionality in your experience as a disabled Latina woman in the United States?
Intersectionality is a really important topic. I'm glad we're bringing it to the surface here. When we talk about intersectionality, we are talking about how our different identities intersect and collide, where power comes and collides, and is talking about systemic oppression. Because when you have multiple marginalized identities, that connects to create more barriers and more obstacles in your life.
Intersectionality means that anyone can be disabled and anyone can become disabled at any time, including temporary disabilities. Disability is an identity that anyone of any race, any religion, any socioeconomic status, any age, anybody can join this club.
The fact that disability can relate to anybody and can be part of anybody's life makes it a really powerful identity to focus on, because you truly are reaching everyone. When we talk about my specific identity of being a disabled Latina woman, it's come up a lot in my life. What I notice and experience is that sometimes different aspects of my identity kind of feel like lenses are turned on. So, in this situation, it's super relevant that I'm a woman and that I'm disabled. And in other situations, all three might be relevant. When I lived in New York City, I would take the subway at night to an unfamiliar place. One thing that I would do when I'm going to an unfamiliar place, especially when I had my white cane with me, a visible indicator of disability, is I would get the maps up on my phone ahead of time and I would memorize the route that I was going to take, because I wanted to make sure that I looked confident when I was walking. I was very concerned about being seen as vulnerable, because not only am I a woman, I am a disabled woman. And so that made me concerned for my safety. And it is a real thing, because as I've traveled around the world, I have noticed that people seem to be very comfortable touching me and crossing that boundary of, okay, this is my body and my space. People would grab my arms. I was one time waiting to cross the street in Portugal, completely aware of where I was going and waiting with other people while a light was red to cross. So in other words, I was displaying the same behavior as everyone else in this group. And out of nowhere, a man grabs my arm. And remember, I don't have peripheral vision, so this is super jarring. I did not anticipate it. And it's like, what is going on? And he seemed very perturbed that I was outside with my cane going somewhere. Like, I must need help. And it was very upsetting to me. And I said, no, I don't need help. Like anything to get him off of me and out of my space. And this was the morning. I was just so frustrated that he singled me out because I was visibly disabled, apparently disabled, and really didn't look at the context clues that I did not appear distressed, I did not appear lost, and that happens to me. I think that people feel more comfortable to touch me because I am a woman and a disabled woman. So one thing I will also share about intersectionality that encompasses all three of these identities are that in the workplace, I personally felt barriers to my voice being heard. For example, being a woman already, if you are an opinionated woman with ideas, you're not always viewed positively. Whereas a man contributing in the same way will be viewed as passionate, a go-getter, a leader. You might be viewed as too much, too loud, in your face, and then with Latinidad on top of that, that's another identity that people can try to bring down your voice with, saying, oh, it's too much or too loud. That also happens for Latina women, where really this is like the way that we talk, and we're passionate, and we have something to contribute, and our communication style might be a little bit different. And then layer my disability identity on top of that. I might be the only one speaking up about an accessibility issue or advocating for inclusion in some way. And so that can then create a reaction of being seen as a nuisance, a troublemaker, someone creating extra work for others. And all of these combine to create obstacles to my voice being heard when I do have something beautiful, unique, and important to contribute. And I have felt that in workplaces. Now, being an entrepreneur, as I am now, the beautiful thing is that I don't have to make myself smaller or quieter for anyone. I can be just as powerful as I want to be, and that's felt super freeing.
Oh, that's a lot. Thank you for sharing. Why is language important in conversations around accessibility, equity, and inclusion, particularly from your lens as a disabled Latina?
Language is super important, and I will always advocate for this because I have gotten feedback that language doesn't matter. Why don't we focus on more important things, doing the real work?
Language is really important when we have these conversations, and I'm constantly defending the need to talk about language because there is a criticism that I hear often that there are more important things to focus on. Why are we debating what words to use? There's always a new word, there's always a new term.
When we talk about language, we actually use that as an opening to a conversation that addresses the deeper attitudes and beliefs. So language is one piece of the work. It's not the whole work. And I would never say it's the only thing that we should be working on, but it's a really powerful entry point that people don't realize necessarily is going to address those deeper things. So I will always continue to focus on language. When it comes to disability, there are so many aspects to the language that we can work on. Just even using the word disability is powerful because there are so many euphemisms for disability where non-disabled people feel uncomfortable with saying disability. And why is that? It's because they feel uncomfortable with disability itself. They feel that disability is bad, is a negative word because they think it's a negative experience. They think it's a suffering experience and they think that it's not a good life. So those beliefs push them to not even want to use the word. Whereas what I would say about disability is that it's a neutral word. It's a community of people. So it's actually a political identity in that way. And we advocate for our rights together. And so it's a powerful connector in that way. And I don't want to see euphemisms being used like differently abled or handy capable. Let's not be uncomfortable with the word disability. Say the word. And this is a message that disability advocates have shared time and time again, to use the word disability. Other types of language changes that we can make with disability, it really taps into addressing microaggressions that happen so much. So for example, using words like crazy and insane very casually in everyday conversation when those can be microaggressions for people with mental health conditions. So saying that the weather was crazy or the concert was insane, we don't have to use disability-related words in order to convey meaning here. We can just think to ourselves, what do I actually mean? how can I use specific language to describe this? So if I was really excited about the concert and it was so impressive to me, I could say, oh, that concert blew my mind, or that concert was amazing. I don't have to use insane in this context. Similarly, there are other phrases that come up that use disability to convey something negative. So for example, the blind leading the blind. I'm blind and I'm a leader. I can lead. But this idea that, oh, the blind leading the blind is like people that can't lead and that can't see, a negative way to look at blindness. When we think about vision disability, and I always use the term vision disability instead of vision loss, we can hopefully understand that being blind is not just about not seeing. There are other skills that we gain that are strengthened. There are gifts to blindness. And so when we think about how we're going to use the word blind in this phrase, we're really only portraying it as a negative thing. So let's not do that. We can just say the ignorant leading the ignorant. Let's not bring blindness into it. Why are you implicating blindness in this? What's really underneath most of these words and phrases is ableism. And that's what you begin to see when you work on language when it comes to disability. We're working on how ableism has infiltrated our beliefs, our language, our thoughts, our attitudes, and oftentimes we do not even realize it. So working on language is that entry point and that gateway to addressing the ways that ableism has impacted us. So I think language is a very tangible change that you can start making right away, and that's super exciting, and it's also a way to begin the deeper journey that we all need to do to undo the impact of ableism.
Could you tell us a little bit about your work as a public speaker and DEIA consultant?
Yes, of course. So as a public speaker and DEIA consultant, the A is for accessibility, if you haven't heard of that acronym. I am coming into companies to do fireside chats, presentations, or keynotes, and it really depends on what a company is looking for. The goal is to improve disability awareness and inclusion and accessibility in the companies, and to give really tangible best practices. I'm always about being approachable, telling stories so that people really can connect and engage, and also making it super clear what people can do right away. Giving things that people can hear and say, oh wow, I can do that tomorrow. That's what I want, because I want everyone to feel like they've learned something, but they're also going to be taking action. So with the different public speaking offerings I have, they're a little bit different. The fireside chat format is what we're showing here. The keynotes are more of a high level motivational message. It's getting people to care about the topic, getting them motivated and excited to say, oh wow, I really align with this message. We have to make a change. So it's more high level. Disability inclusion matters for everyone. Here's why. And then with presentations, I am doing educational presentations, which I actually love because I used to be a classroom teacher. And I use some of those same strategies to make it interactive and engaging. I have a disability awareness session. I have a session on unpacking ableism in the workplace. And that session is really fun and different for people because it has a historical context. And I talk about the history of ableism in our society in the United States and what are the laws that relate to that? What are the patterns and things that were happening to families and disabled kids? So there's a lot to unpack there. And then the third session of my signature series is focused on disability inclusion in the workplace. And I give things that people in different departments in a company can do, whether you're in marketing, HR, product development. I'm sharing best practices. And I also do a deep dive into meetings because we are leading meetings all the time and it doesn't really matter what department you're in. So I want everyone to be equipped to lead accessible meetings and know those simple things that you can do, like always sending an agenda in advance, but also why that's accessible. So that's something that I share in that session. I love being a public speaker and I love being a consultant. With consulting, it really depends on what the company is looking for. I do projects that relate to curriculum development or marketing and communications, like reviewing newsletters or messages that a company is creating about disability inclusion or disability in the workplace. And I've even worked with companies to develop an accessible events toolkit which is so exciting because then you're creating a resource that people are going to use for years to come and really create that change within a company. And one of my favorite consulting projects was developing an accessibility champions program in a global company where I worked for 6 months with 12 internal leaders to help them learn everything that they need to know so they can be the best champions for change possible. So after the 6-month program's finished, they actually made proposals for internal change, and they are now ambassadors, making that company even more accessible. So I love the investment of that program. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I hope it gives you an insight into how I show up as a public speaker and consultant, how I try to make things approachable, understandable, while also giving clear actions and takeaways that people can start using immediately. That's my goal, to share my story, to be giving expert advice and insights that are valuable and can lead to change, because that's the bigger goal here. It's not to just have an interesting talk, but to lead to long-term change in a company so it can be more inclusive and accessible for everyone that's working there and also the populations that they serve. If you want to bring me into your company, if you think this would be of interest to you, then you can go to my website, catarinarivera.com, or in Spanish, catarinarivera.com, and you can request and to book me. You can submit an inquiry and we can talk about what you have in mind, what your goals are, and I can help advise you on what type of speaking engagement or consulting approach could work for you. So I would love to continue to work with new clients. I've been blessed to do this work for over 4 years now, working with over 130 plus clients, and that's really exciting. So let's continue the journey. And I hope that this conversation sparks some new thoughts for you. What was the most interesting thing that you'll keep thinking about? Let me know in the comments and stick around for the next video. If you want to see more videos on inclusive and accessible travel, subscribe to BlindishLatina and let me know all your questions in the comments, and I will see you next time.